So yeah, we're gonna get going. We've been in a series about life in community called "Comfortable with Uncomfortable." Who likes to be uncomfortable? That's why we all have big couches, right? Because we love being uncomfortable. Anyway, it's all good. So that's been great. We had a couple of weeks off because we had Mother's Day and we had Alan Meyer. So we're kind of looping back. So who remembers Laura from a couple of weeks ago? She was so good. But it's good because I don't have to follow her directly. It's a couple of weeks for you to forget how good it was. And so the slate's a bit blank. All good. So we're up to week number 5. Community is formation. And then we've got a couple of things coming up. Community is a witness. And then there's a couple more weeks after that. So I think you get to hear from Sam. Is Gary doing one? Heck yeah. Return of the King. It's going to be good. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about community and how that ties into formation, who we are becoming. Is that cool? All right, let's all take a deep breath because I need one. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how being in Christian community forms us as people, how you staying here contributes to the formation of everybody else, and then some practical points on how to stay when it feels hard. Is that cool? Swell. All right. Well, we'll jump right into it because Sam's already warmed us all up. So we're feeling good, right? We're feeling loose? Swell. Okay, so the things that you do over and over again form you deeply. So who am I becoming? That's the key question that we have to ask when we're talking about spiritual formation. So when I was a kid in Launceston, I reckon about the age Jasper is now, about 10, I remember being in church and hearing a guest preacher come through my little daggy old school Pentecostal church in Launceston and say that your character is the sum total of your habits. And me thinking, no, my character's who I am really inside, the bit that no one sees, that secret, hidden, unseen part of me. But then now that I'm old, evidently, I think I agree. Does anyone like comic book movies? Yeah, those sort of intellectual giants that we are, we love them. Rachel Dawes in Batman Begins says, it's not who you are underneath, but it's what you do that defines you. And so every single thing that you do, day in, day out, is doing something to you in return. And so this is especially true about things that you do again and again and again. So if you watch the news when you get home from work every night, or if you go to the same coffee shop every weekday, or if you buy the same skincare on the internet once a month, if you go on holiday with the same friends every year, if you go to church every Sunday, again and again and again, there's significant formative power in repetition. The things that you do are doing something to you. And so sometimes in our life we like to divide off some of our habits and say, okay, that's my spiritual life, and then this is my everything else. So we like to think, like if I get up early and read my Bible, that's spiritual. But when I go to the coffee shop and order a double shot flat white, normal. But that's not really how things work, right? So Dallas Willard, if you've got your little Simon bingo card, you can get out and tick off Dallas there. There'll be a few. You've got some C.S. Lewis later. Yep, it's all happening. Very good, yeah, yep. Dallas Willard defines spiritual as simply non-physical. It's one of those words which I think we kind of get a bit fluffy sometimes, but that makes it simple for me. I like simple. Spiritual is non-physical, right? So everything I can see and smell about you, that's the physical, and everything that isn't that, that's the spiritual. Does that make sense? Cool, right, yeah. So every single one of your habits and your patterns makes a contribution to your spiritual formation. So everything that you do affects the kind of person who over decades you are becoming. So one of the biggest indicators of what you value or what you love is how you spend your time and your money and your attention. So if I were to get out Kane's bank balance and his statement and all of those Visa debit transactions, and I had to look at Kane's calendar and looked at how he spent his time, I could paint a pretty clear picture about what Kane values and what Kane loves. Does that make sense? And so it's been said by a bunch of different people, from Christian teachers to Stoic philosophers, we become like what we pay our attention to. So the practices and the habits and the stories that we come back to again and again, with or without thinking about it, they determine the kind of person that you and I will become. So I read a little book recently. I borrowed it off Steve. He's king of books. By James K. Smith. It's called You Are What You Love. So we're going to read a little bit of that here. It says, if you are what you love and your ultimate loves are formed and aimed by your immersion in practices and cultural rituals, then such practices fundamentally shape who you are. At stake here is your very identity, your fundamental allegiances, your core convictions and passions that centre both your self-understanding and your way of life. In other words, the contest of cultural practices is a competition for your heart, the centre of the human person designed for God, as Augustine reminded us. More precisely, at stake in the formation of your loves is your religious and spiritual identity, which is manifested not only in what you think or what you believe, but in what you do and what those practices do to you. So here we are in church on a Sunday morning. If you're wondering what we're doing, that's what we're doing. Maybe this is your first time, and if it's your first time here, then welcome. And if it's your first time in any church, then extra welcome. But maybe it's your 1,000th time. I tried to add up how many times I thought I'd been to church. It's a lot, like literally thousands by the time you're in your mid-30s. And so we know that the church isn't there's some cliches here, right? The church isn't a building, it's not a service, but it's the people of God spread out through the world and through time, over centuries. It's both here and it's now and it's everywhere and it's always, right? But it's also, church can be two friends at lunch in a cafe, or a family together around a dinner table, or a phone call to an old friend. Matthew 18:20 says, wherever two or three are gathered there in my name, there I am among them. So what's the net effect on us over time of continually stepping into and being involved with the church? So to step into a community like this one over and over again is to place yourself inside a particular story. So there's a whole bunch of competing stories, right, about what life is and what the good life is and how it all fits together. So there's like the post-enlightenment story of progress. So like we're slowly as a species waking up from all our religion and our superstition, and we're moving together to a democratic utopia under the guiding light of pure reason. You might have come across that sort of narrative. Or there's like the impending doom story. You might get this on TikTok. Look at the world around. We're never going to get the same kind of freedom or agency as generations before. Everything's turning to bad. And so there's nothing I can do about it, so I guess I'll just hold on and hope for the best. Or there's a story of like self-actualization. Like get those habits in line, sort out your gym routine and your side hustle and your haircut and your dating profile and become the best version of yourself. All of these are stories, and we all, to a point, you have the opportunity to buy into them, and they all cast you in a role as a particular character. So to come to church and to sing the songs that we sing, to open the Bible and to talk to other followers of Jesus, that places us inside a story as well. And that places us inside a story of God making all things new and inviting us to be part of that new unfolding kingdom. So sometimes coming to church can feel mundane, or it can feel worse than mundane, but there's something significant in putting ourselves back inside that story with other people week after week. Here's our friend Clive for your bingo card. My own experience is that when I first became a Christian 14 years ago, oh no, I printed this out differently this time. Oh, it's over here. Double-sided, trying to save paper. Oh, where is the other half? There it is. Golly, it's going great. Come on, Clive. My own experience is that when I first became a Christian 14 years ago, I thought I could do it on my own by retiring to my rooms and reading theology. And I wouldn't go to churches and gospel halls. Then later I found out it was the only way of flying your flag. And of course, I found that this meant being a target. It's extraordinary how inconvenient to your family it becomes for you to get up early and go to church. It doesn't matter so much if you get up early for anything else. But to get up early to go to church, it's very selfish of you, and you upset the house. If there's anything in the teaching of the New Testament, which is in the nature of a command, it's that you're obliged to take the sacrament, which means communion. And you can't do it without going to church. I disliked very much their hymns, which I considered to be fifth-rate poems set to sixth-rate music. But as I went on, I saw the great merit of it. I came up against different people of quite different outlooks and different education, and gradually my conceit just began peeling off. I realised that the hymns, which were just sixth-rate music, were nevertheless being sung with devotion and benefit by an old saint in elastic side boots, like these, blunnies, in the opposite pew, and then you realise that you aren't fit to clean those boots. It gets you out of your solitary conceit. So here we are again in church, and here's the verse that you probably guessed I might bring up. Hebrews 10, 23 to 25 says, "Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the days of his return are drawing near." Now, we're going to talk about love is the point, right? So here we go. If anyone been going to the Practicing the Way course? I haven't been going, but I've heard it's been excellent. I've had really good feedback from a bunch of different people. If you've been going or if you've been reading the book, you're going to hear this phrase a lot. Becoming a person of love. Who's come across that? Yeah, cool. It's a good summary of what it means when we talk about to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. Jesus was a faultless example for us in so many ways, but the quality that stands out again and again and that burns brightest was his love. And so here's John. He called himself the disciple who Jesus loved, so I reckon he was onto something. 1 John chapter 4 says, "God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. And as we live in God, our love grows more perfect. So we'll not be afraid on the day of judgment, but we can face him with confidence because we live like Jesus here in this world." So, as followers of Jesus, we're all on a quest to become people of love. So love is one of the squishiest words in the English language. It gets used and misused all the time. So we might say, "I love coffee," but we really mean I enjoy coffee. It's probably the wrong word. Or, yeah, I have a chemical addiction to coffee. I love my dog, or I love going hiking, or I love cheesecake, or I love my wife. But not all in the same way. And so the Bible was written in Hebrew, the Old Testament, and then in Greek, in the New Testament. And both of those languages have 4 words each that we translate to love. And they all mean something slightly different. And we're stuck as English speakers with one word for all 8 of those, hoping for the best to figure out what this Bible thing is about. So I think it helps if we can get a little bit more specific what we mean when we say love. I want to know what love is. I want you to show me. It's all good. Power ballads aside. Thomas Aquinas, who's heard of that guy? He was a Catholic theologian from the 13th century, and he defined love as willing the good of another for their own sake. So we're called to be the kind of people whose automatic response in any and all situations is to will the good of another for their own sake. And so, now, I love a good podcast. I'm a podcast bro, I'm sorry. I enjoy reading a good book, and these resources have been very helpful to me in building my understanding of what it means to follow Jesus. But they're not the other. You can't will the good of a podcast. You can't will the good of a book. You can only will the good of another person. And so these things, they might build my theoretical understanding of what it means to follow God and, who I am and what the world around me is. But you can read every brilliant book in the world, you fill your brain up with N.T. Wright and Tim Keller and whatever else, and good luck to you with that. But that doesn't necessarily translate to me making any progress in becoming a person of love. If that's what the whole game here is about, Christianity, then it stands that we can't really be good disciples of Jesus outside of a community of other disciples of Jesus. Because you've got nowhere to point your love. You need somewhere to point it. And so we live in such an individualistic culture. I don't know if you've noticed. It's easy to miss it, honestly, because you get a bit siloed in an individualistic culture. But like spiritual formation kind of can become this self-improvement quest. You know, like I'm going to develop all these habits, pray and fast and do the Sabbath and read the Bible and life hack this, and I'm going to feel so calm and feel so nice all the time. Go me, spiritually formed. But like, we're in danger of missing the point. And the Apostle Paul knew it. Here's 1 Corinthians, right? Anybody got married? You're going to hear this one. If I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but I didn't love others, I would be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. You can't grow by yourself. Not really. Have fun trying. I've tried, it's fun. But it doesn't really work. No man is an island. Do you know that no man is an island thing comes from this old poem? I didn't even know this until I found this out this week. John Donne from 1624, English poet. Who likes a bit of poetry? Just me and Matt and Olivia. Cool. We're going to read it for everybody just for fun. It's a bit old languagey, so here we go. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. As well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. And therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So, the idea that we're inherently social creatures, it's not a uniquely Christian idea. Here's Aristotle from 4 centuries before Jesus. Translated to English for your ease. Here we go. The individual, when isolated, is not self-sufficing, and therefore he is like a part in relation to the whole. But whoever is unable to live in society, or who has no need of it because he is sufficient for himself, must either be a beast or a god. I like that. I thought that was cool. We need... Oh, hang on, I'm lost again. No, I'm not. Sorry. I printed out my notes double-sided. It seemed like such a good idea. It wasn't. We need each other, not in like a cliched, we're better together, Ben Lee type of a way, but in a literal, fundamental way. I can't survive on my own, despite the rugged shirt. I don't have the skills. I'd need Rob Roots to grow me some vegetables, and I'd need Ben Madden to shoot me a deer. Like, you know... Yeah, otherwise my feet are going to get so cold. But like leaving aside the kind of material things, like if we're talking about getting formed into people of love, we definitely need each other. Here's Dallas Willard. Spiritual formation, good or bad, is always profoundly social. You cannot keep it to yourself. Anyone who thinks of it as merely private matter has misunderstood it. Anyone who says it's just between me and God, or what I do is my own business, has misunderstood God as well as me. Strictly speaking, there is nothing just between me and God. For all that is between me and God affects who I am, and that, in turn, modifies my relationship to everyone around me. My relationship to others also modifies me, and that deeply affects my relationship to God. Hence, those relationships must be transformed if I am to be transformed. Profoundly social. That's a good way to put it. So I came across this interesting idea. I think we've got a slide for this, Sue, if we're a bit lucky, from this little book called The Other Half of the Church. Now, I couldn't find a high-definition picture of this on the internet, so I took a photo from the book and put it up here. There you go. Yeah, maybe that's copyright infringement. Maybe it's innovation. Maybe it's both. So now, this book's written by a pair of guys, one called Michael Hendricks, he's a discipleship pastor, and one called Jim Wilder, and he is a dual-trained neurologist, brain science, and theologian, which is an interesting double-sided coin, isn't it? And what they do, in this book, they reframe this sort of idea of the left brain, right brain thing. So traditionally, for a long time, we've thought of left brain, right brain as like one half of your brain does the creative stuff, Lance singing or whatever, and then the other half of the brain does the analytical stuff, Sam Harrison doing accounting or whatever, all of that stuff. But that's not really how the brain actually works. It's kind of outdated science. And so this is more like how it works, right? The right side of your brain manages the social stuff, and the left side of your brain manages the more complex reasoning stuff. And so the right side of your brain does things like your individual identity, group identity, your emotional responding to other people, your assessment of your surroundings, relational attachments, all of that stuff. And then the left side of your brain does storytelling, conscious thought, number crunching, processing complicated ideas, all of that sort of a thing, right? And so there's a implication for this for what happens when you step into church, right? So when you step into a room like this, the right side of your brain is scanning your environment 6 times per second, and it's asking questions like this: am I safe here? Who here is happy to see me? It's looking for that facial recognition. Are these people my people? Do I belong here? And it's only once that part of your brain has settled down and decided that it's okay, that you can relax, that you're safe here, that these people are okay, that the left side of your brain can actually process any complicated information or any big ideas. And so I can stand up here talking about theology or spiritual practice until I'm blue in the face, right? With all the eloquence I can muster. But unless you feel comfortable and at home with the people around you, you're not going to get a thing. Your brain can't process it. And so spiritual formation is profoundly social. That's how it works. It's how your brain works. So you can't really grow on your own. Proverbs 18:1 says, "A man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment." Now, I came across this quote, and it's like, it puts this stuff so succinctly, but it's so blunt. So you guys ready? Take a deep breath before this one. Joseph Hellerman. Spiritual formation occurs primarily in the context of community. Persons who remain connected with their brothers and sisters in the local church almost invariably grow in self-understanding, and they mature in their ability to relate in healthy ways to God and to their fellow human beings. This is especially the case for those courageous Christians who stick it out through the often messy process of interpersonal discord and conflict resolution. Long-term interpersonal relationships are the crucible of genuine Long-term interpersonal relationships are the crucible of genuine progress in the Christian life. People who stay grow. People who leave do not grow. Brutal, but good though, right? Really well put. And it's not just your formation that's at stake for you staying, it's everybody else's as well. And so me and my family, we've been here at Abundant Life for about 2.5 years now, something like that. And we came from another church. But we'd been there for something like 15 years. And we'd worked really hard in that setting. We'd done stints on just about every team. We'd led youth, we'd been young adults pastors, we'd run small groups, I'd led worship, we'd sat on a whole bunch of key leadership teams and bind buildings and all of that stuff. We were like super busy, ultimate cape-wearing super church people. But we left that church in the great shake-up that was the pandemic, which is still going. And there was a whole bunch of reasons, and this really isn't the forum for discussing all of that. But what it did mean that by the time I showed up here, I was tired. And I was jaded, a little bit jaded, and I was full of questions about how all this works, and whether it works, and it was good. It was good to arrive here. It really was. This is a healthy, beautiful church. It really is. I really mean that. And I got involved in playing in the band, and we were making connections, and our kids were happy. They were doing well, and it was great. And then a few months passes, and the sheen of the newness wears off. The honeymoon's over or whatever. And it's not that we have had dramatic things happen or whatever, but like everything's cool when it's shiny and new, and then it kind of wears off. And then I'm found that, like Winnie the Pooh, wherever I go, there I am. And I'm still left with all of those questions and all of those hang-ups and all of those, does this work or does this not? All of those things, they're not resolved just by shuffling. And so while I was wrestling with all of this and trying to figure out how I was going to interact with the church, capital C, moving forward, like, do I go all in, put my cape back on? Do I stay in but kind of try and be cool and detached? Do I, yeah, detached would work better. Or just leave, honestly, like, I could be out. And it was in that context of trying to figure out all of that stuff that I came across this idea, and it really changed how I thought about the church and how my role fits into that. And it's called the ministry of presence. You guys in a talking mood? Everybody say it. The ministry of presence. There you go. Very good. Well done. You're better than I did. Now, I first came across this from a gent called Josh Porter, who pastors a church in Vancouver, Washington, called Van City. I think it's about the size of our church. It's not his concept. It's been around for a lot of centuries, but that's where I first came across it. And it goes something like this, right? Each one of us has something totally unique to bring into the wider community of the church. And when we reliably show up, we're able to bring our unique personality and our likes and our dislikes and our brilliance and our difficulties into this setting. That's a gift to God and to one another. It's the ministry of presence. And when we think about someone being gifted in Pentecostal land, we usually mean someone who can sing really well or talks really good. But that's not really what I mean here. I don't mean gifted in terms of you look shiny on a platform. But what about someone who's reliably gentle? Or what about someone who's a great listener? Or someone who knows when someone needs a hug? Or someone who means it when they say, I'll pray for you, and they go away and they do it? When you don't show up, you deprive the wider body of what you alone can contribute to it. And so the leaders of this church, Matt and Laura and Sam and like all of us, who stand in key leadership in this church, we will one day stand before God and we'll answer for the health of this church, which is scary, and it should be. But also, I'm sorry, like every single one of us in this room will stand before the Lord one day and we will answer for the health of this church and for what we contributed to it or what we didn't contribute to it. And so, like, honestly, like, I'm standing up here today, right? But I'd be happier in the third row, coming along, singing a couple of songs, saying hello to some people that I like, and then going home to put some oven chips in the oven, chill out. And if that was the honest limit of what I could manage, then that's okay. I really honestly think if that's where you're at, it's fine. It's okay. But if God's given me the capacity to teach others, and I withhold it out of false humility or fear or woundedness or complacency or whatever other reason, then I do answer to God for that. And so if one way or another, I've committed to bring in a ministry of presence into this community. And sometimes it might look like this. Sometimes, like, maybe it won't involve public ministry at all. But I'll show up. And I'll bring my presence. So here's the Apostle Paul again from Philippians. Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Is this Christianity thing working for you at all? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. Don't look out for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Challenging stuff, but good. Let's talk about doubt. I got all the fun stuff today. Everybody, we've got a church today. It's potluck lunch, but it's also BYOD. Bring your own doubts. Matt's in for it. We love it. So let's have a look at this little scripture from James chapter 1. I love the book of James. It's the sassiest book in the Bible, I reckon. Like, It's like he's just got it. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. Let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Let it grow. Tested faith is strong faith. The problem with that is that it's easy to nod along when things are going great. But when your world's on fire, it's a little bit more challenging. Staying the course with both God and with other believers when it gets hard is one of the most valuable things that you can do. I've been so challenged and inspired showing up here in the last 12 months, watching friends like Shaz or Disha, people in this church who are going through stuff, hard stuff, big stuff that you wouldn't want to walk through. And then they're here on a Sunday every week with their arms high, in surrender. And then if you have some idea what Monday looks like for some of these people here today now, like it's worth 100 sermons looking at someone who's walking through that stuff. Viktor Frankl says, to suffer well is a spiritual achievement. So if you're facing some massive situation in your life and you're here, it probably feels hard and it probably feels awkward and you probably feel a disconnect. But well done to you. It's a gift to the rest of us. And we're all going to get our turn at suffering one of these days. So if you're having a great time today, I hope you're having fun. But what about doubt? So what if you're here and you're not sure that you believe all this stuff anymore? Or what if you're here and you don't know if this is what God had in mind when he said, I'll build my church? Or like, what if you've got a whole bunch of beliefs that you've sort of inherited from a lifetime in church and you're not sure what actually stacks up with the Bible and what's just something that you picked up along the way? When doubt gets a mention in church, which it isn't often, honestly, it's usually like a kitsch line in a song or whatever about how doubts can't stand or whatever when we're in the presence of God. I've sung those songs. But like, it gets a bad rap, but I reckon doubt is underrated. In his book, Searching for Enough, Tyler Staton goes back through the story of Thomas, the disciple of Jesus, and he poses that doubt is an invitation to greater intimacy. So if you don't know the story of Thomas, basically, Jesus dies, right? If you read the book, you'll find that out. And then he's raised to life. Shock, twist. And he appears to all the disciples, but Thomas is not there. He was at the shops or something. He wasn't there. And so Thomas comes back and he's talking to the other disciples. He says, well, cool story, guys, but I'll believe it when I see it. There's a disappointment and a doubt in that. It's pretty relatable. And then so he then, next scene is Jesus appears to them again and Thomas is there. And Jesus invites Thomas to touch the scars on his hands and see the scars on his side. Not a reprimand in sight. No berating for lack of faith. Just an invitation to come and see. God's not afraid of your doubts. And God's not threatened by your tricky questions. Bring him to church. Ask someone. Ask a friend or an experienced hand in the faith, someone a bit older, or a leader in the church. Have it out. Let it get a bit messy. Let it feel a bit awkward and a bit strange. Tell God how you really feel. If you ever read the Psalms, like we only ever use the nice ones in church. There's so many in there that are not nice. I reckon God prefers an honest doubt to a postured, fake positivity all day. Doubt's an opportunity to honestly pursue the real God and let your preconceptions of him fall away. And there's an intellectual integrity available as well. Like, can you really believe something until you've considered the alternatives and looked at it properly? So your doubts, they're not so scary, and you're not the first one to go through it, and you won't be the last. So why not do some growing while it's going? Maybe you're experiencing what St. John of the Cross called the dark night of the soul. Maybe you're doing all the right things. Maybe you're showing up, especially you know how. Maybe you're doing all the spiritual disciplines. Maybe you've been doing your best to be honest before God and he just seems to be gone. Now we know God's everywhere, right? And so, but that doesn't necessarily mean that at all times we're actively experiencing a felt sense of his presence. And so God sometimes in his kindness, as an invitation to growth and to greater intimacy, God withdraws the felt sense of his presence from us. And suddenly, like the bridge of the third song doesn't hit like it used to. And suddenly the pre-service prayer meeting where everyone's loud is annoying and you want people to be quiet. And you might just feel dry and it might last a while. You might wonder what's wrong with you and you get stuck there for much longer than you would like. But in that kind of a place, God can do some of his best work in us. Here's Clive again. Now, this quote's from a book called The Screwtape Letters, which is one of the funnest little theology books ever written because it's written from the perspective of a demon to another demon. So there's senior demon Wormwood and he's writing letters to his charge, Screwtape. And Screwtape's tasked with tempting a particular person away from living under Christ, right? So it's a bit confusing. So in this quote, when it's talking about he, it's talking about God. And when it's talking about we, it's talking about demons. Is that cool? It'll make sense when I read it. It's a great read. It's really, really fun. He is prepared to do a little overriding at the beginning. He will set them off with communications of his presence, which, though faint, seem great to them with emotional sweetness, easy conquest over temptation. But he never allows this state of affairs to last long. Sooner or later, he withdraws. If not in fact, at least from their conscious experience, on all those supports and incentives. He leaves the creature to stand up on its own legs, to carry out from the will alone duties which have lost all relish. It's during such trough periods, much more than during the peak periods, that it is growing into the sort of creature he wants it to be. Hence, the prayers offered in this state of dryness are those which please him best. He cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. So all of that said, what do we do? I was going to put out a call to respond today, but then it occurred to me if you'd be like, hey, everyone who struggles to be in church, put your hand up and run down the front. I was like, yeah, let's not do that. Let's take a deep breath. Let's chill out a little bit. Trying to work on social skills, like it runs in the family to be bad at that. But yeah, look, if you're struggling to be here, that's probably the last thing you want, let's be honest, right? And the other thing with that, I really want to honour the people who are in the room today at great personal cost. I really want to honour that. I think that your pain and your discomfort matters. I believe that God sees. He sees the hard stuff. He sees the things that no one else sees. And he honours your commitment to show up for yourself and for other people and for him. And I think that the decisions that you make at 11:30 on a Sunday are great. The decisions that you make on a Monday and a Tuesday about how you're going to value this community and how you're going to live your life, they matter more. This isn't the main game. This is just the coach yelling at everyone for a few minutes so you can go out and play. So hey, what we're going to do, me and a couple of the other people, we'll be praying for people after the service. So if you want to come and get prayer after, we'll be around, right? But we're going to talk about things that help when church is hard. Is that cool? I'll invite the band to get up and we'll get the show on the road shortly. They'll sneak up. So, things that help when church is hard. First thing is this pattern of withdraw and return. So we see this in the life of Jesus, right? Luke 5:16 says, Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. So we need a rhythm, right, of both time inside community and time alone. We see this pattern in the life of Jesus and they balance each other out. So if you're struggling to relax and be at ease in a church setting or a small group or a family setting or any of those things where you're around people, maybe you need to carve out a little bit of time to sit in silence with God. Maybe you need a day off. Maybe you need to go see some mountains, or just take a few minutes with a cup of tea in the morning alone with the Lord. In the last couple of years of my own life, I've been working hard to try and be settled, to kind of cultivate a settled presence, right? So that when people come and talk to me, I'm not all over the place. I feel calm, and I feel like I can be present and settled with people. And it feels like an act of defiance in our current cultural moment where everyone's stressed and worried all the time. I just want to be settled. That's how I'm going to be a punk from now on. But that settledness comes from sitting with God. And if I haven't done it, I'm not settled. It's as simple as that. If I haven't taken the time to slow down and be still, it doesn't work. And we might do some work in Churchland about solitude and silence probably in the next year or two or whatever. But for now, let's have a look at Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It occurred to me that you could shorten his name to Trickhoff, and that sounds like a rapper. But he was a 1930s, 40s era German pastor who wrote this incredible book called Life Together, which is probably one of the most seminal books on the church and what it is and what it means ever written. And he got involved with the plot to assassinate Hitler because he was part of the church that was pushing back against the Third Reich. Incredible guy. Anyway, it wasn't theoretical for Trickhoff. It was all real. And so he says this: one who wants fellowship without solitude plunges into the void of words and feelings. And one who seeks solitude without fellowship perishes in the abyss of vanity, self-infatuation, and despair. Let him who cannot be alone beware of community. Let him who is not in community beware of being alone. So it helps to carve out some space, right? Bit of rhythm. Now, the discipline of study. Now, here's one thing that's helped me a lot to stay in church for a few decades, right? In the Pentecostal stream of the church, that's where you find yourself today, we're really good at some stuff. We expect to see God move through things like healing and prophecy and tongues. We create an experience of church where people feel free to express themselves before God. We're good with corporate structures and trying to make things work and make people safe. Most of the time we do our best, but we haven't always been very good at systematic teaching, and we haven't always been as strong in that as some other parts of the church, like the Catholic tradition or the Presbyterians or the Quakers. And we haven't always had a particularly strong intellectual tradition. And so that means, like, having been in a Pentecostal stream for 20 or so years now, I've heard a whole bunch of preaching and messages, and lots of it has been encouraging. And there's been a fair bit that hasn't necessarily been especially thought-provoking or especially systematic. And so we've kind of erred in Pentecostal land on making things digestible for people who are not familiar with the faith, and that's a good thing. But a few years ago, I guess I started to find myself wanting to ask questions that we weren't really necessarily happy to cover in church, going after some controversial topics and some denser theology and trying to figure out some of that stuff. And so that led me on a quest to go and find different teaching. So I started listening to a whole bunch of different teaching, and over a period of a couple of years, I started to find some stuff that was answering some of the questions that I had. And then one thing led to another, and good teaching tended to reference a whole bunch of books and source material. And I was like, well, what if we read some of these books that these people keep talking about? And so for me personally, currently, I reckon I listen to probably 2 to 3 hours of Bible or Christian teaching a week, and it's almost all when I'm driving to and from work. So I live here in Lauderdale and I drive to the city, 20, 25 minutes each way, and I spend most of that time listening to stuff. And I read like about one theology book a month, something like that. Not heaps, I'm not elite. Like, there's people who do 10 times more than I do and who are way smarter than me. But it's been a massive help to me. And it's made me feel like some of the things I'm going through, I'm not the first and I won't be the last. And so if you feel like you show up in church and where is the fire of people? Where's that genuine passion for God? Maybe you need to read A.W. Tozer. Or if you feel like your Christianity lacks intellectual integrity and you feel like maybe being a Christian is making you dumber, you need to read some C.S. Lewis. Or if you feel tired and you feel worn down and you feel like life is difficult, maybe you need to read some Henry Nouwen. Or if you feel like your faith's all ideas and it doesn't actually make enough difference to what you do on a Tuesday, maybe you need to read Tim Keller. Or if you feel like God's gotten too small and you want to open up your mind to what God might be more like in terms of God needs to be bigger, maybe you need to read Richard Rohr. Or if you're just wondering how to put legs on your Christianity and what do I do all the time, maybe you need to read John Mark Comer. There's a million things you could potentially do, and not everyone's a book reader or whatever, but honestly, like if you've got your own little theology projects or your own little things that you're trying to figure out, you bring that strength back to the body as you figure this stuff out, which is great, and it gives you less of an excuse to be impatient with people. Related to that is to be thankful. Now, I wish this was complex and smart, but it's super duper simple, so sorry about that. There's so much literature out there about the power of being thankful, and we're super well positioned as Christians, I think, to be extra thankful because we know where to point our thanks. We can give thanks to God. And here's Sassy James again. Every good gift and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God, our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. So if you're finding it a little hard to step into church, just find a couple of things and thank God for them. And it doesn't have to be grand, eloquent things. I've thanked God for the trees outside the window and the blind's been open plenty of times. I love the trees. A warm smile or a tasty coffee or seeing someone that you're pleased to see. Thank God for those things. It doesn't have to be grand and on your knees with your arms high, like it can be quiet and under your breath. And it's okay if it feels forced. Maybe it is forced. But if you want to receive anything of significance from God, it really helps to be thankful for the small things. Here's Bonhoeffer again. He always comes in hot. Whenever you read a Bonhoeffer quote, it's always got a little bit of fire on it. In the Christian community, thankfulness is just what it is anywhere else in the Christian life. Only he who gives thanks for the little things receives the big things. We prevent God from giving us the great spiritual gifts he has in store for us because we do not give thanks for the daily gifts. One more little thing. Have you ever showed up at a party or a function and you don't see anyone you know? Not a single soul. There's like 100 people there, all strangers. That's a weird feeling. And then how much difference does it make when you see across the room and you clap eyes on that person you recognise? Suddenly, like, your whole posture changes, your shoulders drop and your face lights up and your chin comes up. You know, it really changes how you feel. And church can be like that sometimes. You can walk in and it can feel strange. You can see these people you sort of know and sort of don't. But that idea is the same. It's good to see a friend. And so find inside your church experience the one or two people who you really click with. Find someone who likes to read the same books as you, or someone who makes you laugh, or someone who likes the same kind of food as you, or you can play basketball with or something, and make a friend and go deep instead of trying to go wide. Because one or two friends who you feel comfortable with and who actually know what's going on for real makes all the difference. Like what we were talking about before, that do you feel comfortable? Do you feel at ease? Are these my people? Like one or two is enough to totally reframe your experience. All right, I'm going to finish up with some song lyrics, and then I'm going to hand back to the band. And after that, I think me and a couple of the other guys, I think we'll be up here praying for people if you want. Otherwise, look, I hope this has been helpful, especially if you've been struggling. And we're going to, I'm going to read these words and then I'm going to skedaddle. And then we're going to have some food after. Is that all cool? Yeah. Swell. This song is probably the most compelling song I've ever heard on the topic of the church. And it's full of lots of yelling. So you can go back and listen to the original. It's called Torches Together. Why pluck one string? What good is just one note? One string sounds fine, I guess, but we were once one notes. We were lonely wheat, quietly ground into grain. What light and momentary pain. So why the safe distance, the curious look? Why tear out single pages when you can throw away the book? Why pluck one string when you can strum the guitar? Strum the guitar.